Democratic Alliance is now in charge of some of the biggest Gauteng metros, including Tshwane, Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni. The DA was helped by the Economic Freedom Fighters and ActionSA. In Tshwane, new Mayor Randall Williams says South Africa must rethink the way coalition governments are run, as the country will have more of them going forward. To take a look at these newly formed councils, I'm joined by political analyst, Professor Barry Hanyane. Professor, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. It was essentially a watershed election, looking at some of the strategies that came to the forefront by the EFF, pushing out the DA and handing Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni to the DA, two of the most hotly contested hung councils. What did you make of this game of chess, essentially?
Well, good morning to your viewers. It was expected that the 11th hour race, as it were, is likely to be complex, is likely to bring in few surprises there and there, a change in room temperature, a change in strategy, almost. Remember, there were pre-election commitments and convictions that were registered by various parties, others drawing the line that they would not work with the National Majority Party, the ANC, others somewhat lukewarm, others choosing not to commit themselves in particular positions. But then when things started to shape up, the race was somewhat in favor of your Patriotic Alliance, which made it clear that it's more about positions, it's more about influencing the politics of the day, and not necessarily investing into somewhat of a medium to long-term goals. So here we are, fast forward. We're sitting with a totally changed setting altogether. Somewhat of a fragile DA takeover of the metros. It may augur well in terms of being in charge of perhaps the richest province in the continent, one would argue that way, not necessarily nationally, but that fragility in terms of consolidating power may very well be tested between now and somewhere in the next 5 years.
And it's quite an important aspect of the conversation, especially as we perhaps ask the question of whether this would essentially mean that the EFF will be pulling the strings in the background.
Well, it's very difficult to predict what the EFF have in their sleeve. I'm tempted to say, could there be a sinister campaign somewhere in the corner that they are perhaps planning? Or is it a question of saying, let's bring in strict politics here? And by strict politics, let's punish the ANC. We've been put under tremendous pressure, uncomfortable space, being expelled from the mother body itself, having to form the EFF was no walk in the park. So in actual fact, your politics of vengeance may very well play a role here. To what extent, we'll have to wait and see. But overall, it does bring that element of saying, if we lost on the table fair and square in a chess game, by no means, let's bring in street politics. We will not put all our cards on the table, but here's what we're going to do. Create a conducive environment for us to actually influence politics behind closed doors.
And I suppose, the DA wouldn't want to see the same situation that transpired or face the same fate as in 2016, the disastrous councils in Joburg and Nelson Mandela Bay.
Absolutely. Although one might argue that some of the issues advanced were somewhat reasonable, the issue of insourcing, on the one hand, unfortunately, wanting to influence tender processes, which, by the way, is against the basic rule of politics administrative interface. And the DA would obviously be sensitive to that. And sadly, this has brought bad memories on the part of the DA negotiating team, more so Madam Helen Zille, who reminded everybody in her interviews en masse that this is what is uncomfortable with any prospect of forming a relationship with the EFF. And they would not forget that anytime soon. And unfortunately, such an experience has today led to the process in which we find ourselves in. Our municipalities, but in the end, late hour negotiations which resulted in the space that we find ourselves in now.
Professor Hanyane, we heard President Cyril Ramaphosa yesterday expressing the huge disappointments when it comes to what's played out over the past few days. What does this now mean for the ANC itself as a party when it comes to perhaps going back to the drawing board?
Easier said than done, eh? I don't see any concrete movement to want to modernize the party. I'm trying to be as specific as one would want to see this happening. For starters, the House is in disarray. How is it possible that 4 months consecutively, staff members who were supposed to be the spine and the pillar from which the party could have waged a serious campaign to reclaim lost ground, would find themselves in the streets doing against the party that is their employer? Secondly, the office of the SG, the engine of the party, things are not okay. You have a suspended SG. You have an overwhelming burden on the part of the acting deputy SG. You have an NEC that's divided. You have a president who does not enjoy outright power thanks to post-Nasrec 2017. So all these issues, notwithstanding issues of ethics within the party, they are likely to be cumbersome, and they're likely to put the party in question under tremendous pressure. Where is the template? Where is the program of renewal? It's easy to talk to this rhetoric, but less so about concrete steps to be followed.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time and that analysis. Let's leave it there for now. Professor Barry Hanyane giving us a sense of some of the outcomes of these agreements and, of course, what it means going forward for the ANC, which suffered big losses around the several hung councils.